My name is Rabbi Wernick, and we're going to start where it left off last time. So we're learning the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, I guess we call it the abridged code of Jewish law, chapter 80, and we are up to the law or paragraph 28. So chapter 80, 28. All right. So we'll start with an introduction. On Shabbos, we're not allowed to do malacca. That's normally translated as work, but that is probably not a very good translation, because there are things that, work, normally you think in your mind, that means things that are difficult, right? And there are things that are very easy that we can't do on Shabbos, like turning on or off a light switch. And there are things that are perhaps hard, where if you walk to shul and you are some distance or upstairs or various things. So hard work in Hebrew, normally the word is avodah, right? So the word eved is like a slave. That's the root word. That's the hard work. Malacha means a technique. Now, in modern Hebrew, they use it for a profession, a specific profession. Someone's a architect, let's say. So that's his malacha. But malacha is a technique. It's something that we do. So when they built the Mishkan, when the Jewish people came out of Egypt, 40 years in the wilderness, Hashem told them to build a Mishkan. They translate that in English as a tabernacle. Honestly, if you asked me to define tabernacle, I probably couldn't. But the Mishkan was like a giant portable synagogue on steroids, essentially. It was a tent, and they could take it apart and then they carried the parts as they traveled. And when they came to the new place, they put it back together. So there were 39 malachas, 39 techniques or skills that were used in building the Mishkan. And it's those 39 things that we can't do on Shabbos. So for an example, not the one we're discussing today, but just to give an example, one of those malachas was called Makkah b'patish. That means literally hitting with a hammer, but it means everything is set to go and it needs one final tap or adjustment. So let's say, just say for an example, they're putting the wall together. It won't hold weight, won't stay up on its own now. But if we, so I'm just, a few more people came in, just admitting a few more people to the class. Okay. All right, welcome to everybody who just joined us. I'm sorry if you were in the waiting room for a while. So we were just giving an introduction about malacha. Malacha being the things that we can't do on Shabbos. And these are the techniques that were used to build the Mishkan, this portable synagogue the Jewish people had in the wilderness. So 39 things. So they sowed seeds because there were things that were growing. So that's something we can't do. They baked bread, so there's baking that we can't do. There was bread, showbread that was in the Mishkan, et cetera, et cetera.
Excuse me, Rabbi. May I have your name?
Rabbi Wernick.
And are we dealing with the Shulchan Aruch now, or what text?
Yes, so the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abbreviated Shulchan Aruch, we chapter 80, and we're paragraph 28.
Thank you.
You are welcome. All right. So we'll start with 28. I'll just read through it, translate it, and then we'll start explaining. Yes.
Excuse me, may I ask a question from the
Please.
last one, which was, of course, Rabbi Yossi Lipschitz? There was a distinction between sugar, which is cooked, and salt, which is not cooked, in that you could add sugar to a hot food, but you could not add salt to a hot food. Do I have this right? I wanted to ask whether you can add salt to a hard-boiled egg or to a soup, which is a bit bland.
Okay, so it, just to answer that, depends on the definition of hot, right? So hot means it came off, it's in the pot that was cooked.
Oh, you froze. To me, he froze.
Rabbi, you froze.
I don't think he's even there. I see nothing on his screen. Does anybody else?
There,
I see his
him.
face.
I
His
see
face, but it
name.
hasn't moved for a long time.
He said earlier, if we do get disconnected, then he'll be back.
Oh, is that a
Rabbi said
promise?
if we got disconnected, he would be
That's a-
back. Don't worry.
That's a promise, Naomi? Thank
Yes,
you.
that's what he said. He's from Arizona by way of
That's-
Australia.
Oh, that's where, that was not an Arizonian accent for sure.
South
He also,
Arizona.
he also said if he used an Australian expression that we didn't understand, we could feel free to ask.
Great. Okay, so
Right.
what page are we on? I have the art scroll.
Chapter 80.
What page?
Oh, I think I'm sorry, I didn't get it down. I don't have my book.
It's chapter 80, halacha 28.
Yeah, I
Thank
know,
you.
but we have the page. I don't know if I'm on the right book.
80, we're
I think-
continuing where we left off.
No, but Lipschitz used a different book, I think.
Art scroll, page 547.
547?
Right.
All right, it's a different book for me. Oh, you got the Kitzer. Okay, I don't. That's the problem. Thank you.
But chapter 80 would be chapter 80.
Yeah, well, I've got to figure it out. Okay, thank you, everybody.
My apologies, I got cut off.
Okay, you were answering my
All right.
question with the
Yes.
definition of, it depends on
Yeah,
the
so my
definition of
apologies about that. So anyway, the hot means if it's on the original, it's the original pot it was cooked in.
Oh, okay.
Say the soup was boiled on the fire. So that pot, once you transfer it to another vessel, it cools down. So taking the soup with the ladle, then putting in a soup bowl, you would be able to put the salt in. If you're very concerned, you can put the salt on the side of the bowl and then let it sort of mix in from there.
Oh, okay. And a hard-boiled egg, and out of the refrigerator, it goes without saying that you can salt it.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, thank you.
No problems. Okay, so we're chapter 80, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged version of the Shulchan Aruch. If you don't have one, you can sort of put this Zoom on part of your screen and you can look at Safaria, do a search for safaria.com and you can get Kitzur Shulchan Aruch there. So chapter 80, halacha, the paragraph 28. It says, Hashoifeich mashkim b'mokim shekarka matzmachas. So somebody pours a liquid. Soon we'll define what kind of liquid. Into a place where there's ground, where something can grow. So not cement or, a road. We're talking about actually earth. Chayev mishum zareya. So this person has transgressed the malacha, the technique, the thing we can't do on Shabbos, of zareya, sowing. That's sowing S-O-W, not
Got it.
W, right? And we'll explain exactly what he did in a moment. Because the liquid causes that things will grow from the ground. And therefore, yesh lezaher melecho begino. A person has to be very careful not to eat a meal in a garden. Why? It's very difficult when you're in the middle of a meal that some of the liquid won't fall on the floor, on the ground. Milvad, and there's another reason, Milvad Zeus, besides this, Yesh begina isa tiltul. In a garden, and again, we'll get to what type of garden exactly we're speaking about here, but in a garden, there could be the problem with carrying on Shabbos. Okay, so that is the sif, that's the paragraph. Now we'll start to try and understand it a little bit better. So we said, whoever spills a liquid on the ground. So they've done zoreya, sowing. So what is the malacha of sowing? So when they built the Mishkan, they built this tabernacle, this portable shul in the wilderness, they sowed seeds for various things. First of all, the spices for the incense, they had to grow them. Also, every week there was the showbread. There was special bread that went on the table in the Mishkan and also later in the base of Mikdash, in the temple. And every week the loaves were changed over. So they had to plant the wheat. So sowing is one of the malachas, one of the things we can't do. And every malacha, it has an av and a tolda. An av means the primary way, exactly how they did it when they built the Mishkan. And a tolda, which literally means it's children, means
what comes out of it.
Yeah, something similar, but not exactly the same. So the av of Zoreya is either planting seeds or saplings. They're planting trees. So that's the av. The tolda is anything that promotes growth. So if you prune in order to make things grow better, fertilizing, or in this case, watering the plants. Anything you do to promote growth is part of this malacha. So if someone pours water directly on a plant, then they have done the malacha of sowing. Even though they didn't sow a seed, didn't actually plant a seed, but they've promoted growth. So that's the problem. Okay, so we've said that pouring water on the ground promotes growth, and therefore that's a subcategory. It's a tolda of sowing. What type of ground? So when we read the sif, we explained that we don't mean things like cement. We mean a place where things grow. What if there's no plants? There's no grass. It's just dirt. Is that a problem as well? So the book we're reading, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, abbreviated, the summary of the Code of Jewish Law, he just says karka, ground, seemingly any ground, even if there's nothing growing. Other authorities say no, it has to be somewhere where something grows. So there's grass, there's plants, herbs, something there. So if there's absolutely nothing growing, well, then you're not promoting growth. So therefore, if there's no plants, it's not really so much of an issue. You don't have to pour directly on a plant. We say even within 3 tefachim. Now, a tefach is a measurement. It's a fist. I'm not threatening you, not waving my fist, but the average width of a fist, they say it's approximately 3.5 inches. So 3 of those away from the ground, away from the grass or the plant is also an issue because the roots are in the ground and they take their nutrients and their water from a wider area. So that is the issue. If you pour directly on the plants, the grass, or within 3 times 3.5 inches. However, if we pour on earth, there's potentially another problem. And that's a problem, another one of the malachas, another one of these 39 techniques that we can't do on Shabbos, is kneading. We can't knead dough. Again, they made using the show bread as an example that they put on the table. When they made these loaves of bread, they had to knead the dough. If we pour liquid on directly on the earth, remember when we were children and we played with the mud, made the little mud pies and everything. So potentially mixing the liquid into the earth could be kneading. So that's potentially a problem. You would need a good amount of liquids, not a little drop or two. So if it's directly on a plant, the smallest amount is a problem. If it's just plain earth, only a good amount that makes it doughy, muddy. There's just a few drops. It's not an issue. Okay. Now we said we can't pour liquids on the ground. Which liquids? So the Kitzur, the summary of the Shulchan Aruch, didn't say what type of liquids. Other commentators do. So only a liquid that promotes growth. So water, as an example. Someone would pour alcohol. Now, to be honest with you, I've never tried to feed alcohol to my plants. Apparently, the alcohol burns the plant. So not only does it not promote the growth, it actually damages the growth. Similarly, urine, right? Urine, if someone is stuck outdoors and Shabbos and they have the need to go, then that's not a problem on the grass because it does not promote growth. It damages the growth. So that's the liquids. Okay. That is what we can't do. We can't pour water or another liquid that promotes growth onto the grass or other areas. So some people at home have an outdoor sink, especially around Sukkot time. Sometimes we set them up and it's not connected to the drain is not connected to the plumbing. It drains onto the ground. So the question is, can you use such a sink on Shabbos? Does anyone want to volunteer what they think? You think you can? You can't? Yes? Okay. Dr. Liebman, you want to, what do you think?
I think that you can't.
You can't? Okay. And why do you think that?
Because if you have a sink for convenience, you have it there probably to wash more than anything else that you might have been doing, and it would be water. Even if the water is polluted with scraps from, your dinner or whatever, it still has more water.
Hey, that is part of our situation. So when you have this outdoor sink and the pipe it just drains directly onto the ground, the first thing is, if you want the water to go onto the ground, now the difference between the water in the sink and pouring water directly is from the sink, it's indirect. You open the faucet, the water goes into the bowl first. It doesn't go directly on the ground.
Just answer it.
Sorry?
Who is it? Oh.
Okay. Only afterwards, it goes on the ground. So you're doing it indirectly. Now, one of the things that it's going to come up quite often as we learn about the things we can and can't do on Shabbos, that if something is done indirectly, it's only a part problem. Another idea we're going to have that comes up often is if you did something unintentionally. So an example of unintentionally would be you were moving an outdoor chair and it made a little, as you dragged it, it made a little furrow, a little mark in the ground. So could be, I mean, it looks like you're plowing, right? One of the things we can't do in Shabbos is to plow a field. Now, you didn't have any intention to plow. You're just moving the chair. So that can sometimes be an issue. It depends on the weight of the chair. But if we can combine unintentional together with indirect, the combination of these two makes something permissible. Because each one of them only makes it half a problem, and we put them together, they take away the problem. So in the case of our outdoor sink, the water is not directly going onto the ground, it's indirect, because the water we pour goes first into the bowl, the sink. Then afterwards goes through via the plug and a little bit of a pipe or whatever you have there into the ground. So half a problem taken away. If we want it there near the ground, because we also intend to water the plants as we're washing our hands or whatever we're doing, then it's problematic. But if it's not our intention, just have it there because, for an example, we set up a sukkah, we have an outdoor barbecue, what eating area, whatever it is. Yeah, not having the barbecue on Shabbos, but we're Yom Tov, or we're just having an outdoor eating area. We don't particularly want the water to go on the plant. Then we've taken away another half a problem. It was unintentional, and the unintentional combined with the indirect means that we're permitted to do it. Another potential, by the way, feel free to ask questions at any time. Or something here.
If you do something unintentional, isn't it called missing the mark? I thought it read once it was defined as missing the mark. In other words, you didn't quite hit the bullseye, but you missed.
Yes, there's different types of unintentional. So the unintentional that you're speaking about, that would be, let's say, for an example, there was some fruit that was, let's say, a vegetable, you'd picked it before Shabbos, right? Because you're not allowed to pick things growing on the ground, right? You've got a strawberry, let's say. You can't harvest the strawberry on Shabbos, but you pulled them up before Shabbos. And whatever reason, you left them there by mistake, on purpose, they're there. Tomorrow, it's now Shabbos. You want to get that strawberry that you had picked before Shabbos. And you're intending to pick that one up, and by mistake, you've grabbed one that is still connected to the ground, and the person plucks that one. So that's unintentionally speaking about that you would sort of call missing the mark. In other words, you intended something different, and here you intended one action and did another action. The type of unintentional that I'm speaking about now is that you don't even want the water to go. I mean, as far as you're concerned, water could go to the moon. Just happens to be that gravity, when it goes through the pipe, it ends up on the ground. But you have absolutely zero intention for this water to go on the ground. You might want it out of your sink, but you gain nothing. So it's totally unintentional. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi.
Yes.
It says, my name is Moshe. What did
Nice
they
to meet
do?
you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. What did they do in Europe, Eastern Europe, when the bare ground was used as, they didn't have carpeting or they didn't have wooden floors. They just used, there was just soil on the ground. I think if I'm not mistaken, in Eastern Europe, many of the the homes had just
Dirt floors.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
They had dirt floors.
Dirt floors. So what did they do then when water came on the floor, or seed or anything like that would touch the ground? I mean, during the Shabbat,
Yeah. So the issue of sowing wasn't so much of a problem. because the ground inside the house, nothing's growing there. You know, outside, it can look like nothing's growing there, but sometimes you have plants that are dormant, or the seeds are dormant under the ground. And as soon as there's some water, you know, out they sprout. But inside, particularly, everyone's walking on it, they're stepping on it, they're treading on it. And in general, a place where you tread all the time is not so much of a problem for the sowing, because the constant pressure, you know, stop things from growing. That at least takes away the sowing. The kneading problem. So what they used to do, they sprinkle sort of wine, actually, or some other liquid, and used to keep the dust down. And that constant walking made it hard. So unless you poured a tremendous amount of water, you didn't have the kneading problem either. And some places they also put straw on the ground. And that's how they clean up. You know, every time you have to sweep your floor now, just be thankful. Don't complain. We don't have a dirt floor.
Yeah.
Anyway, another application of this idea, sometimes on sukkahs, you build your sukkah. Now, I'm living in Phoenix. It doesn't rain. I'm in the desert, so we don't have that problem so much. But a lot of places, it can rain on sukkahs. So people put a tarp or something else to cover the roof. Let's say it rained. You've got water has collected in the tarp. And when you're going to take it off, now the water is going to go on the ground. So what does someone think about that one? Can we do it or not? Any thoughts?
You have no intention of watering the ground for the specific purpose of growing things. So the intention is not there.
Very good. So that is part of the issue. Now remember, with the sink, it was a combination of two issues. We had the unintentional and there was indirect. Here we have the unintentional. We just want to open up the roof so we can use the sukkah. But we still have direct, because now the water is going to go directly onto the ground. So now it depends. If it makes no difference, for an example, it was pouring rain. The ground is now saturated. The little puddle of water that you are going to pour on by opening your sukkah roof, that was covering of the sukkah roof, makes absolutely no difference. So if it makes no difference, it is no problem. But if the ground is still relatively dry, and now we're going to end up watering the grass in a way that's beneficial for the grass, it can be problematic. So you have to think carefully about how you cover your sukkah. Try and have it in a way perhaps that it doesn't go directly on the ground, or it goes onto some cement. You know, sometimes it's easier if you, again, depends what your yard is like. You know, if you have a cement area or a tiled area, but if it's in the middle of the grass, hopefully if it rains enough to make a puddle, it's rained enough to really saturate the grass.
Rabbi, I used to live in Toronto, and it was a common thing that you'd have to shake off the snow in order to make the schach kosher. But the question is, you're shaking off the snow onto the ground, onto the lawn. Are you allowed to do that or not on Shabbos and Yontif?
That'll probably be the same issue. I guess the lawn, if the roof of the sukkah is covered in snow, I presume the ground is as well.
Yes or no? If there's enough inches, like, to get onto the sukkah roof and stay there, yes, usually yes.
Yeah. So then again, it'd be like that same idea that the grass is saturated with water. And if you're ever concerned about the snow in sukkahs, come to Phoenix. Here we install air conditioners in the sukkah. It's All right. Our next potential issue, sprinklers. So we put, many people have sprinklers on timers. So we can't turn the sprinkler on directly on Shabbos because we're watering the grass, we're doing Zuraya, we're promoting the growth. But what about if we set the timer before Shabbos and it goes on by itself during Shabbos? What does anybody think about that?
That should be okay.
Why do you think it's okay?
Because, well, I know that certain timers have what I call slop, meaning that they don't go specifically on a particular time, but can go 15 minutes either way. So you actually have no idea when it's actually going on. That's the first thing. Second thing is the fact is you can consider that to be like a grandma switch.
Right. So you're saying because you're not doing directly, you've done something before Shabbos and it's happening on its own on Shabbos. Okay. So that generally is how we look at it. In other words, anything that I actively did, I did before Shabbos. And a little bit, let's say for an example, many people put their lights in the homes on timers. So light goes off on Shabbos, goes on Shabbos. Obviously, they're not doing it themselves on Shabbos, but with a timer. So the same idea. There is another potential issue, though. So there's a concept called Morris Ayin. Morris Ayin means do something that doesn't look right. So I'll just give a random example just to get the idea. So let's say, I mean, you can't really see what I'm wearing, but at the moment I'm wearing a long black coat, and I have a beard and I wear a yarmulke and tzitzis, I look slightly Jewish. So if I would walk into McDonald's to buy a Coke, now it could be the Coke in McDonald's might not be kosher anyway, because maybe things splash all over the nozzles and all kinds of things. But just for the sake of the example, let's presume you could get just Coke. And Coke is kosher. And someone who looks like me walks out of McDonald's with the McDonald's cup with a straw, sipping my Coke. And other people go by and they see me doing this. So this is called Maris Ayin. One of two things could happen. Number one, someone might say, oh, there's a rabbi coming out of that McDonald's. I didn't know that McDonald's was kosher. Oh, now I know. I'll go there tonight. And God forbid we've caused someone to do the wrong thing. That's one problem of Maris Ayin. The other problem is someone could go by and say, look at that hypocrite. Calls himself a religious Jew and he's going to McDonald's. I don't want to have anything to do with Judaism anymore. God forbid, so that can happen also. So if someone puts on a sprinkler on Shabbos, and someone going by, especially if they know that you are a religious Jew, and so if they don't know you set the timer before Shabbos, they might think, oh, you're allowed to water the lawn on Shabbos. And they will either, go with the hose or turn the sprinkler on to make a problem. So Rabelsky, who was passed away about 2 years ago, was probably one of the leading rabbinical figures in the English-speaking world. He suggested that, he suggested only sprinkler if it's in a private place. So if you have a fenced-in backyard, no one's going to see it, and not in public on Shabbos. So even if the sprinkler goes every other day, maybe turn the timer off on Shabbos. That was his suggestion. There are other halachic authorities who say that if the grass is going to die, or the plants, whatever it is, if your worried it's going to die, then even in the front, if it's a timer, it's not a problem. But if it will survive okay for another day, don't use the timers on Shabbos. So guess each person will have to look at their own situation. Now, normally the grass will survive one day, but sometimes newly planted saplings or things, particularly in the warmer climates, really need to be watered every single day. So I guess you look at your own situation and see.
Rabbi,
yes.
I have a question that I'm sure has been asked a million times, which is, it says that Hashem does the mitzvahs that he's asking us to do. So
Right.
how can Hashem come along on Shabbos and water the lawn? Like, why doesn't it just stop raining on Shabbos in the different areas of the world where it's Shabbos and stop, that's my question.
Excellent question. So let's go back a step. What does it mean that Hashem keeps the mitzvahs that we do, right? So, if we use, let's say, putting on tefillin, for example. So, since Hashem is infinite, Hashem doesn't have an arm. Infinite is totally unlimited. So, it doesn't mean the same physical action that we do. It's on a spiritual level. Everything is on some sort of spiritual level. Hashem is doing the same sort of thing because, some kings, worldly kings, they tell everyone else what to do, then they go do what they like. Hashem is an honest king, and therefore, on some level, spiritually, Hashem does whatever he asks anyone else to do.
Hello, Rabbi?
Yes.
Yes, this is Moshe again. I know this is not a topic for the faint-hearted, but...
I'll just finish answering his question, and I'll come back.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So when we say that Hashem is going to keep Shabbos as well, it doesn't mean a physical action. So we're talking on a spiritual level. So on a spiritual level, the creative activities that we're speaking about, if you look at the first 6 days of creation, into the world. It was actual creation. So although we don't have new species, so to speak, come to the world, but
Rabbi,
there are minor changes.
Are you able to mute until a person wants to ask a question? Because there's background noise. You're getting blocked out a little bit.
Just muted everyone, so hopefully that helps. So when we say that Hashem keeps Shabbos, we're talking about the acts of creation don't happen. It doesn't mean that the laws of nature, which although that's also Hashem by divine providence, orchestrating every little detail, but the way it looks is the process is already in motion. Well, stopping that, so all of a sudden, you had this water evaporated from the ocean, it's turned into clouds, it's blown over this field. If you would stop the rain, mid-air when Shabbos started, that would be the breaking of Shabbos because you've interfered with creation. So I hope that answered your question. And then, Moshe, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I don't know whether this is really applicable, but let's say somebody is living in a rural area and they have a barn and they have horses and it's near a garden and the horses are outside the barn. Normally there's hay in the barn, but outside the barn there's soil, okay? And horses obviously they have to go to the bathroom, and nitrogen is produced from their feces and so forth. Now, when this happens, is the owner obligated to put the horses back into the barn before Shabbat, or are they allowed to stay out and maybe cause
So fertilizing, which would be promoting growth.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
In this case, the issue. So again, if you take a horse or any other animal to a specific area on Shabbos because you want them to fertilize, then that is that's a problem. So you brought them there for that purpose. If the horse has a certain free rein in its paddock and it's somewhere on its own, it's doing things on its own, particularly if it was in that area before Shabbos, then there's not an issue.
I see.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
this is Tanina Sarah. I didn't get the answer to the question with regard to the snow that comes off the sukkah's roof onto the ground. I mean, what was the, I didn't hear it properly. What was the answer with regard to the additional runoff or the saturated ground?
Okay, so we said we're presuming if there's enough snow on the roof that you have to get it off the roof of the sukkah. You know, it's means you don't have a sukkah roof anymore. You've got this thick covering. Means there's also snow on the ground, unless for whatever reason it only snowed on your sukkah. You know, might be time to move, but there's enough snow on the ground. So when you throw the snow off, you're not watering. You're not putting this form of water onto the ground because it's already covered in snow. It's like it's saturated with rainwater already.
And the saturation, the rainwater would also be like that it's already saturated, so you're not really watering.
Correct. So what you're doing creates no additional benefit.
I see.
No additional benefit. And as there's no benefit and it's not your intention, so then there's no problem. However, if someone intended, while they throw the snow or the water, the rainwater off the top or the top of the sukkah, if they're actually intending to water the plants, well, then it's a different story. It's only permissible because there's no intention and it doesn't add anything. The two factors combined that make it permissible. Okay, so we've been discussing essentially anything that promotes growth. So what about this scenario? There's pot plants in the house, and from time to time they open the windows and curtains to let in extra sunlight directly on the plants so they grow better. That's a problem because you have done an action deliberately to promote growth. But let's say the pot plant is next to your front door and you want to open the door because you want to go out or come in. Your intention is, it's just by the way the sunlight shines on the plant. Can you open and close your door? What do you think?
Yes.
Why do we say yes?
Yes.
Because it wasn't
Because
intended, you didn't intend to bring the.
otherwise you can't get out of your house.
What we're saying is because we'll be stuck and someone else had the intention. And so being stuck is unfortunately not a, that doesn't help us. You know, if you have electric doors somewhere and you're stuck, what can you do? One Shabbos, when I was in high school, it wasn't last week, by the way, but one Shabbos, there was somebody asked, we were in shul, and unfortunately, someone had passed away, and the body, the Chavre Kadisha was not able to pick them up before Shabbos, and they wanted people to say Tehillim, say Psalms with next to the deceased over Shabbos, and they wanted people to take 2-hour shifts. And so I went with a friend of mine, and we come to the hospital, and there's the electric doors. Now it's a sensor, and it opens. So you know you can't use those doors on Shabbos. So we figured we'll wait till someone who's not Jewish walks in, and we'll just follow them in while it's open. So you never know who's Jewish. But then we saw a group of people. We said for sure they're not Jewish. There was tattoos and piercings and mohawks. Good. So they walk through, the door opens, we quickly run in behind them, and they turn around and say, "Ah, Shabbat Shalom, Habibi!" They were after the Israeli army service, touring the world. But anyway, what can you do? So being stuck, unfortunately, doesn't help us. But someone else mentioned it's unintentional. We don't have any intention when we open the door. Our intention is just to Of course, then if someone had the intention, I want to go in and out and provide the sunlight to my plants, then it becomes a problem. All right. We also mentioned the garden. So the type of garden that we're speaking about is not your garden as in your backyard. The type of garden they're speaking about is like a commercial vegetable garden. Now, people lived in an agricultural society, so this large vegetable garden, you can't carry on that in Shabbos. Although it might be fenced in, it's not fenced in for human habitation. It's fenced in to keep out thieves or rabbits or something. So that was the issue with the garden. But in your own back garden, if it's got the fence, even if you live in a place without an Eruv, and of course it's part of your house, it's all closed in, you can carry whatever you like in your own garden. So that was paragraph 28. Any questions before we move on? No questions means one of three things. One, I explained it so well, there's nothing to clarify. Two, I explained it so poorly, no one has any idea what I was talking about to even ask a question. Or three, it was so boring, no one was paying attention. I'm just going to tell myself it was number one.
And I'll say it was number 4. Number 4 is you allowed questions along the way, and therefore you clarified the questions that we did have already.
Okay, thank you. I got worried when you said number 4. I thought it was going to be even worse, but thank you for that one. That was that's encouraging. Now I'm going to give 4 options in the future.
That's a brilliant answer. I love her answer. It's true. That's correct.
Right. Okay. So law or paragraph 29 says Safoig she'ein loy beis achiza, a sponge that doesn't have a handle, ein mekanchim boy, you can't wipe with it. Let's talk about wiping a table. So what's the problem over here? So another one of the malachas, another one of these 39 techniques that they on building the Mishkan that we can't do on Shabbos is called dosh. Dosh means threshing. So I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'd never threshed grain before. I buy my flour in the supermarket, and so a lot of these things I haven't had practical experience with. But essentially, they're taking the kernel from the husk. So the malacha is something edible out of its casing that it was made in. So grains from their stalks, the kernels from the stalks. They used to have oxen tread on the grain, although you could do it by hand. And so that's the malacha. So with a sponge, as soon as you use it with water or other liquid, it becomes saturated. It immediately soaks it up. So if you're going to apply pressure, then the water is going to come out. So that's the problem. If we do this malacha, we would use the sponge. We've essentially squeezed the water, which is technically edible. I mean, it could be the water we clean with. We wouldn't be planning on drinking it, but look, in times past where we weren't so fortunate to have the quality of water we have today, it certainly is drinkable most of the time. And so that makes a problem. So therefore, we can't use a sponge to wash dishes and various things on Shabbos. Now, if we need to wipe up a spill, let's say we have a spill on the table or the floor. Now, you could use a sponge that has a plastic handle or back, as we said, very gently, because then you're not applying the pressure directly, you're not squeezing it, you're not gripping it directly. So that's one possibility. If you use a cloth to wipe up a spill, so we can't wring out the cloth, right? That creates the same problem. In other words, the story, they say at the circus of they wet a towel, it was dripping with water, and they had a strong man and squeeze out every last drop. And they said, anyone who can squeeze out one more drop, it's a $100 prize. So all these big bodybuilders, they came and they're trying squeezing, nothing. And one small little Jewish guy, old man, comes and he starts squeezing out buckets and buckets and buckets. I said to him, what do you do for a living? He says, I'm a fundraiser for the UJA. So that's squeezing out of the wringing of the cloth is a problem. That is taking it out. So another thing, if we use a cloth or a rag or something, then if it gets very wet, becomes saturated, then we have to change. We can't keep using it. We have to use another one. We can't even touch it because then what about baby wipes? Or some of us use them if we're not babies. They're moistened. Do we think we can use them on Shabbos? What do people think? Any suggestions? And again, there's no right or wrong. I mean, there is right or wrong. But sorry, I'll just say one thing. Just say that if you knew all the answers, you would be giving the class. So no one has to feel they have to be worried if the answer is not totally correct. Let's get the mind going. You know what you think. So sorry, I interrupted someone. They were going to give us.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Isn't the baby wipe disposable? It's pre-moistened. You use it, you throw it away. You're not wringing it out.
Okay, so you're definitely going to wring it out. The question is, when you use it, are you going to squeeze anything out?
Toss it.
Yeah. So right. So that's half the problem. Correct. So generally speaking, they're not wet enough that when you use them, they're going to drip. And we're definitely not going to wring it out. So we're going to just throw it out. So there's not a problem. Brushing our teeth on Shabbos. Now, unfortunately, for the same reason, we can't use a toothbrush on Shabbos. My kids love this particular Shabbos law. It's one of their favorites. They get to go a day without brushing their teeth. Sometimes they go through the stage where they try and get away with more than one day, but that's another story. But squeezing it out means we can't even squeeze or wring out water that's between objects, between particles. So when we brush our teeth, it becomes full of the water, gets between the bristles, and as we push, it comes out. So on Shabbos, you can use mouthwash, you can use your finger. It's all different techniques that people have. They do sell these special Shabbos toothbrushes that there's less space, or actually more space, sorry. So, actually it doesn't keep things in between the bristles as much. A separate issue to that, those who brush their teeth and their gums bleed also can't brush their teeth on Shabbos because we can't make wounds on Shabbos. Any questions on that? Got to keep up the number 4 so we don't get 2 or 3. Any okay, so I think we can squeeze in one more before we finish for the day. Number 30.
Rabbi, just
yes.
Going back to spills, can we usually use paper towels just popping on top? What if it goes over the Shabbos table?
Yeah.
Line.
So paper
Is that all right?
towels are okay. Again, if they get really saturated, really waterlogged or wine logged, whatever it is, then we have to be very careful when we pick them up that we're not squeezing out the liquid. But if you put enough that it's, and you spread it out, and also not to push down as you wipe it up. Just sort of place it and let it absorb. Then you're not squeezing anything out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, number 30. You're not allowed to spit in a place where the wind is going to scatter your spit. Side point to this, I think we should avoid spitting in public in general, but that's a separate issue. So what's the problem? I mean, halachically, besides, perhaps not being polite, but what's the Shabbos problem with the wind blowing our spit? So again, one of the other malachas is winnowing. So after we thresh the wheat, you'd have a heap of debris. It's chaff, it's the things you don't want, but there's still some mixed kernels mixed in. You've crushed it, the kernels have come out, and now you need to separate the kernels that you want from the chaff that you don't want. So they used to toss the mixture in the air, and the wind would blow away the chaff because it was much lighter, while the heavier kernels would fall to the ground. So that is what they did. So the prohibition, the malacca for us, are a few things. Number one, if you throw something into the wind and the wind scatters it, even if it's not edible, there is an opinion that that is the malacca. Second opinion is only if you intend to scatter it. You care that it scatters. You're just throwing something away. You don't care where it goes, whether it falls to the ground or scatters, then there's not a problem. But if you intend for it to scatter, that becomes a problem, potentially. The third opinion, this is the one we're going to rule like, is that even if it scatters, it's only a problem if you intend to retrieve something. So for an example, the actual malach itself, they threw the chaff and grain mix into the air. They intended to retrieve the grain. So if you just crumpled up breadcrumbs and you just threw it to the wind and you don't care where it goes, you're not retrieving anything. So that is not a problem. Now, when someone spits into the wind on purpose and he wants the wind to scatter it to take it away, then according to most opinions, that becomes a problem of winnowing. You never knew that spitting could be so complicated, did you? Hey, so that's 3 halachas for today. We'll be up to 31 next week, God willing. Any questions?
Matter of remembering these things.
Yeah, it's well, we just review and review and review. That's the now, for example, it's why we read the Torah every year, go through the whole reading.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. What was the third one again, as opposed to the second one? Because
Only
I thought if you intend, if you
Second
intend,
one was if you intended for it to scatter.
yes.
And the third one was not only you wanted it to scatter, but you wanted to retrieve.
Oh, to retrieve it. Thank you.
It didn't scatter. So it's one of the things we have to remember, talking about remembering everything, that the Torah is the product of God's infinite intellect. So it's an infinite amount of things to learn. Now, being that none of us are infinite, we're never going to get there. And we don't have infinite memory. So we just keep plugging away, doing as much as we can, as often as we can, and the best that we can. That's all we can. That's what we're expected to do.
Right.
All right. Well,
Thank you, Rabbi.
you're very
Thank you.
welcome. There's all people in
Thank you,
different time
Rabbi
zones. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
morning,
so
good
much,
afternoon, good
Rabbi.
evening.
Very
You're very
thorough.
welcome. Pleasure to meet you all, and I look forward to getting to know you better over the next few months.
Shabbat shalom,
Okay.
everyone.
Good Shabbos.